I'm going to address the subject, so you want to be a tech entrepreneur. And what I hope to accomplish today is to walk you through some of the key principles around technology entrepreneurship, ideas, themes that you'll see throughout the semester. And also I want to introduce you to some of the resources that are available for education in entrepreneurship. So, where did I start in computers? Back in 1975, my dad brought home a box of parts. And we soldered them together and we made this Heathkit computer. We built this from a kit. Here's a picture of the insides. That's not my actual computer. This is some photo I got off the web. Our actual computer is long ago disappeared, filling some land somewhere. Okay, so then, as Josh said, I got a bachelor's degree in computer science because from day one, as a 14-year-old teenager, I was hooked on computers. And I've been a software guy ever since then. And I've developed across the range from mobile devices to mainframes, a lot of PCs, web stuff, you name it. I've probably been involved with it. And currently I've been doing a deep dive in mobile development, and I'm teaching the web development class in information systems. So that's enough about me. You probably have a pretty good idea that I'm a geek, and that would be true. What is an entrepreneur? Okay, an entrepreneur, literally the word is French and it means undertaker. So did you think you were going to be an undertaker? No, but it's not in the sense of at the morgue dealing with dead bodies. An entrepreneur is one who undertakes an enterprise, somebody who owns and manages a business. And one of the key distinguishing factors behind an entrepreneur is the person who takes the risk of profit or loss. It's not just yeah, it's going to, I'm going to get a paycheck every 2 weeks and life's going to be good. You've got risk. You've got to overcome that risk, and you've got to work hard to fight the challenges that are out there. But the rewards are equally great. Technology entrepreneurship specifically, here's my definition. It is the creation, the cultivation, the management of ventures whose core products are based somehow on information technology. So if you've got a website that's a key part of your startup, that could well be a technology play, but every business sort of needs to have a website at this point. And so that's not a definitional thing. You can't say, well, I've got a website, so I'm a tech entrepreneur. You could be selling books, and you could be a tech entrepreneur. Jeff Bezos, is he, or I think he says Bezos. He's from Cuba, or his dad is. Is he a tech entrepreneur, Bezos? Yeah. He's selling books. Does that make him a tech entrepreneur? It's the way he sells books that makes him a tech entrepreneur. And maybe it's the billions of dollars of wealth that go with it. Anyway, but one of the key characteristics of tech entrepreneurship is that you're building a scalable venture, one that is going to reach beyond just local narrow borders. It's going to go out broader. Maybe you'll get to change the world. Has Pinterest changed the world? At some level. Has Facebook changed the world? Yeah? Okay, so that's the idea behind tech entrepreneurship. You're doing something that can have very far reach. And when you create wealth, you're not only creating wealth for yourself, you're creating wealth for the people around that business, and you're generally improving the economy for the whole, the country and the world. And you have more influence when you have access to all of those resources. Okay, so let me talk for a minute about the center. Why a Rollins Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology? We saw a number of years ago how the trends were that our world was becoming increasingly networked and digitized. And really the implications of this are profound. How many of you are connected to the internet right now? I am. I'm sitting in my pocket. I feel comfortable. I feel kind of happy that, I'm not worried. I've got an internet connection. We've become accustomed to that. Digitized. How many of you use Netflix to watch TV? That's a lot of hands. Okay, back in the day, we couldn't do that. We had to watch it broadcast over the air at the time the show came on. Talk about a bummer. No TiVo? Man. Okay, by the way, here's a hint for all you guys out there. If you get your wife a TiVo for Valentine's Day, that gift might not go over so well the day you give it to her. 10 years later, she'll be happy about it, but the very day of, she'll think, no, that's a Homer gift. So don't do that. lesson from my experience. Okay, so we want to prepare our students to lead, not just to follow, but to lead in this networked and digitized world that this world is transforming into. We think our students are as capable as anybody anywhere. Why can't we start the next big tech idea here? And so that's why the Rollins Center exists. So the reason that I feel comfortable in the Rollins Center is because I've been an entrepreneur, it seems like, since high school. I had a small group of friends. We were coders for hire. We had a couple of little tiny minor companies. As soon as I got back from my mission, the first place I went to work for was a tech startup, and we were doing software development. We had a program called Bible Quest that demonstrated the technology that would do a full text index of the Bible so you could look up a word anywhere. Today you say, well, I just go to Google. But 25 years ago, you couldn't do that. That was a big deal back then. Anyway, so, and we walked uphill both ways in the snow to school. So in my early college, I was involved with a couple of different kinds of startups and doing a lot of software development. That's what I've done my whole career long. What I realized, though, when I was in these startups was there are some interesting problems I'm trying to tackle that I just don't have the tools to solve. And so I decided I'd come back for a graduate education, and being an overachiever, I went for a PhD. And then I got to know the people here in the Marriott School. They recruited me into the Information Systems Department, and I've been really happy here ever since. But I have had a chance to do some sabbaticals and to do some things on the side here and there and to get involved in startups. And so I feel like I've got my thumb on the pulse of it, and I really enjoy tech entrepreneurship. Now, having had that kind of experience, I can look back and I can say, well, what is it that I believe a tech entrepreneur needs to know? So maybe one of the key things, and this is really hard to kind of figure out, is how you identify and develop an idea that's an opportunity worth pursuing. I mean, you may have an idea that seems like a great idea, but if there's no market for it and there's no money to be made doing it, maybe it's not an opportunity worth pursuing. Another area that you need to develop knowledge in is just the skills of startups. How you create, manage, finance a venture. How you sell to customers. How you bootstrap, how you raise money. How you build a team, and how you get that team to do what you need to do to move your idea forward. There are specific areas like marketing, advertising, branding, all of these areas that you need to develop skills in, and a ton more like that. You kind of need to know it all. So where do you go to find that education? Well, here in the Marriott School we have a minor. How many of you are in the business minor? Okay. We also have a business management major. There's an entrepreneurship emphasis. Anybody here in the entrepreneurship emphasis? A few? Okay. There is also an information systems major. How many here in the information systems major? A fair number. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to be trained to be a tech entrepreneur, but the opportunity is there if you information systems people want to develop your entrepreneurial skills to go with that. And there are various graduate programs that you could get involved in. The MBA, the MISM, others as well. If you're really an engineer and you like the art of crafting and constructing these things, it might be that a major like computer science would be appropriate for you, but that doesn't really teach you anything about the entrepreneurial side of things. There's a smattering you might find here and there, but we hope to supplement that with the things we do at the Rollins Center, in the business management minor, and so forth. There are several centers besides our own. If you're interested in social entrepreneurship, there's the Economic Self-Reliance Center. And there are a number of clubs that you've heard Josh talk about. We've heard about the Innovation Academy. There's the CEO Club. There's the AIS Club. And there are others. And you really owe it to yourself to look at our competitions. And we give away hundreds of thousands of dollars, actually. Tens of thousands at a time, but we give away a lot of money throughout the year. And we hope to really encourage and to help foster your progress in your businesses. And we hope that the money in the competitions goes to building your startups. Now, one other aspect of knowledge and getting help, mentoring is a really vital aspect of any kind of entrepreneurship. Nobody does things alone. Now, we all mocked President Obama when he said, "You didn't build that." What he was trying to say didn't come out quite the way he was trying to say it, in my opinion anyway. We don't typically build things alone. Typically there is mentoring around us. And so the role of mentors is vital in startups, and we at the center have a lot of people who are willing to be those mentors for you. We have people who are experts in specific areas like mobile development or web development. We have people who are lawyers and understand the legal issues that you might face. We have a number of different kinds of entrepreneurs, investors, people who are donors to the center that we call founders, who really understand what's going on and are willing to spend time with students to mentor them along the way. So we have a website, getmentoring.com, that you can go to find resources. You can also stop by the office and talk to our Director of Mentoring, Venture Mentoring Services. But you probably should not plan on, I'm just going to go sit in a corner and be an entrepreneur. You need to be out and networking, and you need to be engaged. You need to be going to a lot of these events. Why? Well, if nothing else, selfishly, you need to build a team. You're not going to probably build your company without some kind of a team. And so you need to recruit people. You need to be out talking to people. You need to be putting your ideas in front of them and getting feedback and looking for mentoring. So the role of networking is really crucial. Now, we're asking you to read Nail It and Scale It for this class and to do a book report on it. There are other books also that are really good. We love The Startup Owner's Manual by Steve Blank and Business Model Generation by Alex Osterwalder. Our very own faculty members, Gary Rhodes, Mike Swenson, and Dave Whitlark, have written a book, Boom Start, that talks about principles of entrepreneurial marketing. Great book. There are a lot of resources, and we have a library down in 470 that you're welcome to stop by and just browse through some of these books and check them out if you want. So entrepreneurs need to be reading as well. You can't always be off working on your company. Sometimes you need to be developing some additional skills and seeing what else is out there. Oh boy. And there's a lot more you need to learn too. You need to understand where the world is going. An entrepreneur needs to see down the road and anticipate where the ball is going to be and get to that spot to make the catch. So I think that if you're going to be a tech entrepreneur, you either need to be excellent at technology yourself, or you need to have a good geek as a partner. Either be the geek or know a geek, one of the two. But geek is part of your life if you're going to be a tech entrepreneur. At least that's my opinion, speaking as a geek. Remember Napoleon Dynamite? Remember Kip? Remember his song at the end to LaFonda? About how he loves her a lot, but still he loves technology, always and forever? Okay. Not quite the nerd that Kip is, but anyway. You also need to be excellent at business, and you need to be excellent at interpersonal relationships. You've got to have a way to, you've got to open doors, and you've got to be, it's kind of like that missionary experience all over again. You don't know exactly what you're going to face. You've got to be able to go into any situation and build and open doors and so forth. So I think those are the things that make, generally speaking, for a good tech entrepreneur. And I know that's a kind of a big whirlwind of a whole bunch of topics, but let me get specific now and talk about 3 fundamental concepts so that you can kind of see some trends. And as speakers come in throughout the semester, you can understand some of the terminology they're talking about. I want to talk about these 3 principles that underlie a lot of tech entrepreneurship: network effect, disruptive innovation, and exponential technology growth. Network effect. A network effect is something that occurs when a product becomes more valuable as more people use it. So the telephone network is the typical example we use here. First person to buy a telephone, that wasn't such a valuable product. I mean, you could say I was the first person to buy it, and you could have bragging rights, but that's only good if other people buy it too. So if there are 2 telephones in my network, then I can call one other place, and that other place can call me. We have the value of these 2 units. Now what happens when we add a 3rd unit in? Now I have 2 places I can call, and 2 other people have 2 places they can call each. So we have 6 units of value sitting in this network. Add a 4th connection. So now I have 3 people I can call. and there are 3 other people who each have 3 people they can call. And you see how the value of the network grows exponentially as more people join in. Now, I didn't have to pay extra money to be able to call those other people. I'm able to call them because they're part of the network. Think about Facebook, for example. There's a network effect with Facebook. If only half of your friends were on it, would it have the value that it has to you today? So a network effect occurs, a product becomes more valuable as people use it, and that drives a network effect. Robert Metcalfe is the founder of 3Com, and he actually invented Ethernet, which is a big standard for networking technologies. And his law, Metcalfe's law, states that the value of a network increases in proportion to the square of the number of users. That's just a way to say that it grows really fast, grows exponentially. It turns out that the initial cost of building the network is typically large, but the incremental cost of adding one on is very small. So when you go sign up for cable or for satellite TV or something like that, it costs a lot of money to put those satellites up in the air and in orbit around the Earth. It doesn't cost them a lot to come and install a dish on your house and plug you into the network. And so that's an example of a technology where you hope to have a network effect. What happens when you have a network effect is you get this winner-takes-all situation. So look at the iPhone, for example. The iPhone experienced a network effect, and it grew really rapidly. And maybe I asked you this before, but how many of you have an iPhone? Okay, that's a little more than half. How many have an Android phone? Yeah, a little less. So this audience is heavier on the iPhone side than on the Android side. That means you're probably more affluent than the average worldwide audience, because there are more Android phones out there than iPhones, but not here. Okay, why do you buy an iPhone instead of an Android phone? Maybe it's because there are some great apps. I mean, don't they advertise how many apps there have been and how many downloads there have been from the App Store? Okay, well, users like to buy iPhone because there's a lot of good software available for it. Really good stuff. And now, developers like to write software for the iPhone because there's a bigger audience for it. And so that's a feedback loop that builds on itself. And when that kind of thing happens, you very quickly get a monopoly. I prefer developing for the iPhone today. In fact, my app, I'm going to go plug it in real quick here and show it to you. Let's see, where's the control panel here? So here's my Citation Index app. It looks like it's clipped a little bit at the edges there, but that's all right. So if you're giving a talk in church and let's say you're going to speak on obedience, and so you're going to quote 1 Nephi 3:7. So you go to 1 Nephi chapter 3, and you look down here to verse 7, and you see all the general conference talks that use 1 Nephi 3:7. And you say, oh, okay, I want to see what President Monson had to say in April of last year. And there it is, up here at the top. Here's a quote now that I can put into my talk from President Monson at conference. And we've got the scriptures, we've got general conference, we've got journal of discourses, and scriptural teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith on here. And anyway, that's been a lot of work, but it's been a lot of fun. I prefer developing for the iOS platform because I have a better audience for it. When I compare my Android and my iOS growth, because I have an Android version also, I see better response and better growth on the iOS side. So anyway, bottom line, a network effect generates a winner-take-all situation. And it'll converge very quickly when you have all of the dimensions in place to create a network effect. Your goal as a tech entrepreneur would be to generate that network effect, where it takes a lot of effort to build that network in the first place. But once you've got that put together, it's easy to add one more user at a time, and very quickly the market will converge if you've got a good product that they like. Does that mean you can't break into a market? No. It used to be that Windows was the only desktop operating system. How many of you are using Windows as your primary operating system today? I'm saying that's about half. How many of you have Mac OS as your primary operating system? Yeah, about half. Anybody who uses a Linux desktop as your... Oh yeah, we got a few. All right, fellow geeks, got it. Okay. Any other operating system I didn't mention? Okay. All right. So Windows experienced this very same effect, and you can see that that's eroding on them somewhat. It's not quite the monopoly it used to be. Okay, so that's principle number one, network effect. You want to create a network effect for yourself if you can. If you're fighting somebody else's network effect, then you've got to take a longer-term strategy that's going to build over time. And let's talk about how you disrupt. So a disruptive innovation is an innovation that displaces an existing or an entrenched technology. So iOS is entrenched. That's an entrenched technology. Who wants to be the disruptive technology there? Google with Android. They want to disrupt iOS. To some extent, they're having some success with that. Okay, why does a disruptive innovation displace an entrenched technology? It's not because it performs better. Some people will say Android does perform better than iOS. Some people will have the opposite opinion. So opinions vary on that. But when Android first came out, the iOS people kind of snickered at it. They said, well, that's not even serious. Come on, guys. But over time, it gets better. But the reason it can displace it is because it provides an overall better value. That's the key here. It's not better performance, it's better overall value. What you're doing is you're trying to alter the basis on which you're competing. Let me try to explain this. So every technology has a trajectory over time. There's going to be a low end of the market and a high end of the market. The market is going to ask for a certain level of performance. So you're driving a car, you have certain expectations today that you would not have had 100 years ago. Okay, today you expect power windows, power locks. You expect air conditioning. Well, most of you expect air conditioning. How many of you have heated seats in your car? That's a few hands. Okay, how many of you have power locks in your car? That's not quite universal, but it's pretty close. How many of you don't have a car? I guess I should ask that question. Okay. That's a few. All right. But over time, the market gets more sophisticated, and so it demands better cars. Where 20, 30 years ago, you didn't demand power locks on a small economy car, today you kind of expect that. You kind of expect that. You can buy a car without it. In fact, I have a friend who has one, and it drives me nuts. Anyway, when we go to lunch and we have to unlock it manually, I think, come on, where's your smartphone that'll unlock it remotely? Okay, over time, you're going to have, every technology is going to follow a trend. It's going to keep getting better and better and better. Now, notice the difference between the angle of the trend of the sustaining technology versus what the market demands. The manufacturer of that technology is going to improve it faster than the market requires. So this creates a little bit of an opportunity here. Along comes a disruptive innovation, and it follows its trajectory. Now notice what happens at the point where it enters the low end of what the market is asking for, expects. At this point, the sustaining technology is well above the high end. Now, if it's this really cool high-end technology, what do you think it costs? Yeah, probably a lot of money. That iPhone might be a lot more expensive than some cheap Chinese-built Android phone. I understand that the Chinese manufacturers are selling in mainland China some Android phones that cost $50 to $100 to put together, so they can reach a larger market. And part of the reason is they're not paying all the licensing fees that maybe somebody who's in a higher end device has to pay. That Retina display that you love on your iPhone, well, it costs money. So initially, we look at that disruptive innovation and we laugh at it, we scoff at it, and we say, I'd never use that. It's not nearly good enough. But at some point, if they stick with it, it gets good enough to where the market says, oh, wow, look at the value. Instead of spending $300 on this thing, I can spend $100. Yeah, it's not going to perform exactly the same way, but I can live with that. And that's the equation that people weigh in their mind. So, disruptive innovation. What you're trying to do there, sorry, let me just back up a second. With disruptive innovations, what you're trying to do is you're trying to focus on an underserved or an unserved market. You do your innovation in that underserved or unserved area where anything is better than nothing. And so you can experiment and explore, and eventually you get it to where it's good enough that the mainstream market sits up and pays attention, and they start to buy it. How many of you looked at the features of a smartphone and said, man, I want the features of the Android. It's the features I'm after. How many of you did that? Just one? Come on, be honest. Now, I did it because I want tethering through my T-Mobile service, and I don't want to have to pay anybody an extra fee for tethering. I can serve my iPad or any other devices through a mobile hotspot with my Android phone. So for me also, that was a feature-based decision. Over time, people are going to look at that feature situation, and that's going to flip at some point. The latest version of Android is close to parity with iOS in terms of how good it is. Okay, so if you want to disrupt, focus on an unserved or underserved market, do your work there, innovate there, then transfer that over to the mainstream market. Okay, third principle that you'll hear over and over again, Moore's Law. Moore's Law, it's not really a law, it's an observation. 1965, which happens to be the year I was born, Gordon Moore, who co-founded Intel, saw what was happening with the growth of integrated circuits. He said, hey, you know what? I see that about every 24 months or so, we're seeing the number of transistors on our integrated circuits doubling. Now, what you can do with a transistor, for those who aren't electrical engineers, you can store a bit of information, so a 1 or a 0. It's a unit of computation. It's a measure of how much you can do or how much you can store on a computer. And so if the number of transistors doubles, your ability to do things doubles as well. And here we have from Wikipedia, and I don't know if this is the current one, but the last time I checked, this was the graph on Wikipedia. If you look up Moore's Law, you'll find this. The CPU transistor counts follow this doubling every 24 months pretty closely. That dashed line is a log linear line, so that it's growing exponentially, but they flattened it out. Well, anyway, never mind. It's doubling every 24 months. Okay, here's what Moore's Law illustrates. In a very short number of generations, you're dealing with an astronomical number of possibilities. Let's take an anecdote here. Emperor of China was enthralled by the game of chess. He met the inventor of the game of chess and he said, well, you know what? This is such a great game, I'll give you whatever you want. Up to half the kingdom, of course. That's always the caveat, right? When the king's giving stuff away. Can't have more than 50%. Got to retain control. So the inventor of chess thinks about this for a while, and he goes, okay, what I'd like is 1 grain of rice. And the emperor goes, what? A grain of rice? 1 grain of rice for the first square on my chessboard. I would like 2 grains of rice for the second square, 4 grains of rice for the third square, and so forth through the whole board. Emperor thought about it for a while, and not being a mathematician, he foolishly agreed. Oh, great. Now, what happened when he tried to fulfill that request? How many grains of rice would that be? There are 64 squares on a chessboard, 8 by 8. So by the time you get to the end of one row, that's 256 grains of rice. By the time you get to the end of the second row, that's 65,536 grains of rice. By the time you get to the end of the fourth row, you're talking about 4 billion grains of rice. And by the time you get to the end of the chessboard, you're talking about 2 to the 64th power. I mean, that's so many, it's hard to comprehend how many that really is. We don't grow that much rice. Not in all of China, not in all of the world, not in the history of mankind. So, doubling every generation, I mean, that goes a long way. Now, how far have we come from 1965? How many doublings should we have had?
We're at 22 nanometer right now.
22 nanometers is the current distance between transistors on a chip? Yeah, and people keep on predicting the end of Moore's Law, and somebody keeps on figuring out how to double. So people are creative and ingenious. So 2013 minus 1965, how many years is that? 48, okay, got it, good. We can do our basic business math. Now, how many doublings should we have had then? 24. 2 to the 24th power. And what is 2 to the 24th power? Let's see here. Anybody have a calculator? Can whip that out real quick? $16 million. So computers today should be 16 million times more powerful than computers 48 years ago. Is that about right? Your smartphone is vastly more powerful than the computers they flew on the Apollo missions to the moon. Vastly more powerful. When I started that Heath kit that I showed you at the beginning, it had a 2.5 megahertz CPU, which means 2.5 million operations per second, which we thought was super fast. Today, 2.5 billion operations per second is what we're doing. It had, I think, 48K kilobytes of RAM. Now today, if you have a really hot workstation, you might have 48 gigabytes of RAM. You probably have 2 to 4 gigabytes of RAM. Maybe you have 8. Anybody here have 8? Anybody have more? How much? 16? 16? 16. Okay, so 16 is the number. All right, if you want to be the uber geek, 16 gigabytes of RAM. All right, so we can do this because we have this doubling that happens because of Moore's law. Now, what we found then is that we have these converging trends. We've got increasing computational power. We can compute things faster. Increasing storage capability. We can store things faster. And by the way, storage and network bandwidth have been growing faster than doubling every 24 months. When I first saw that I could go to Costco and buy a 1 terabyte drive for $100 or so, I thought, man, I am doing that. I went and got it because I just had to. That Heath kit had a cassette recorder as its storage. Okay, and then later we added a floppy disk onto it, but it was like a 100K floppy disk, something like that. So, you know, I've been seeing this growth over my lifetime, and it's really quite amazing. We look at a 500 gigabyte hard drive and we think, well, that's kind of average, maybe low, you know? And that's what happens with Moore's law. Network bandwidth. Okay, so it's never fast enough, right? It's never fast enough, but it's growing very rapidly. We can transmit things today very quickly. You know, when I was in high school, we had these modems, and you'd actually pick up the telephone handset and put it on the acoustic coupler, and it would do the, you know, the electronic flatulation that you hear, the buzzing and beeping, and it would go 300 bits per second or 1,200 bits per second. After my mission, I remember thinking, oh man, 9,600 bits per second is really fast. I love that. I can do things remotely at 9,600 bits per second. Well, guess what? You're not going to transmit a Windows or a Macintosh desktop at 9,600 bits per second. You need the kind of fiber optics and other really fast networking capabilities that we have today. How many of you are on fiber at your home? Maybe you don't know. How many don't know? Okay, that's probably more of you. I have DSL. I don't use cable modem. I have DSL. And it's too slow. I want something faster. I want Utopia to finish their network build out and get over to my neighborhood. And will they quit being so slow? Anyway, converging trends of computational power, storage capacity, network bandwidth. It all happens at a lower cost per unit over time, and increasing connectivity. You can be doing internet stuff on I-15 as your spouse is driving the car, right? You better not be doing it yourself. Okay. So here's this virtuous cycle that we're in. As we increase the speed and capacity and lower the cost of our technology, we perform our processes faster. We innovate and rethink what it is that, how we run our companies. And we do things better. What that lets us do is it lets us develop new goods and services to sell to the market. And as we do that, hopefully we have a network effect that's also building that demand for more IT. And so we increase our research and development so that we can continue to go through this cycle. And we have this virtuous cycle that very rapidly is changing the way things are. I can hardly recognize the world today in technology terms compared to 10 years ago. You know, try to rewind and think back to what cell phones were like 10 years ago. Okay? You can go Google a few pictures just to see. So technology has been changing rapidly for my entire life. Since I was born, it's been changing rapidly. Now what's happening also is business is starting to change just as rapidly. People are innovating their processes and procedures the same way they're innovating their tech. And this is happening so that business changes very quickly. How many of you buy through Amazon.com or other electronic commerce retailers? That's almost everybody. Okay, that's different than going and walking down to Walmart or Kmart or whatever the mart is and picking up physical goods. Now, so how do you meet all the changes in this changing world? As a millennial, you kind of need the ability to, I think you've got to figure out how you add value to a company. You can't just show up and say, I have a skill set, let me put in my time and I'll punch the clock and I'll do something. I think you need to understand the competitive drivers of that company and really try to impact the company at a strategic level. You've got to find a way to innovate, to make things better, and not just sit there with status quo and just do whatever you're told. I think you need to be creative and active. The non-creative kinds of things get outsourced. The creative kinds of things are what give you really good jobs and let you have an impact in the company. And I don't think it's good enough just to be a technology guru. I think you really need to understand what are the strategic drivers of this company that I'm involved in. Even if you're a software engineer sitting in a corner programming, you need to understand what it is that makes your company money so that you can be thinking about how do I innovate the things that I have any influence over. I think one of the things a millennial needs to do is to be able to figure out how to use technology to solve problems in novel ways. That's part of that virtuous cycle I was showing you a couple of slides ago. You're going to have to retool over and over again. If you want to stay current, things change so quickly, you just have to be involved in reading magazines and websites, blogs, staying up to date with what's happening in technology. It changes so very rapidly. I can hardly ever teach my iOS class the same way 2 semesters in a row because Apple's releasing a new version of iOS in the middle of my semester. And it's just happening so rapidly. You need to retool. So if I look at my programming experience, you know, I've gone from microcomputers to Unix-based kind of mini computers to mainframes to, then we started into websites and then mobile devices. And I have had to retool a number of times. And I look back at the stuff I wrote 8 years ago, or even 6 years ago, and I say, man, that's kind of old stuff. Got to redo it. Constantly changing. Be ready for that and just accept the fact that you need to do lifelong learning. You can't just come to college, learn a few things and say, okay, that's it, done with learning. You've got to continually evolve because the world around you is evolving. I think one of the key characteristics of the millennial generation is the desire to focus on quality of life. You can do a lot of things. So why don't you choose to do something that you enjoy? Something that you're good at, something that's going to add value. And don't just choose to do something that's going to give you a paycheck. Figure out what the quality of life is that you want. Many people are thinking about this and saying, you know, I think people today maybe need to know how to make their own job, how to invent their own job. And so we've seen a number of thought pieces along those lines. You've got to think about your career actively and not just say, you know what, I'm going to go work for the man and put in my 40 hours a week and that's it. I think that was our father's generation, my father's generation. Maybe it's my generation to some extent. So here are some of the lessons that I want you to take away from what I've had to say. I think that the business environment is evolving rapidly. And you've got to tool up and get ready to stay up to date with how that environment is evolving. You've got to watch for trends, and here are some of the key trends that I'm seeing today. Cloud computing and virtualization. People almost never sit down to build a startup now and say, you know what, I've got to buy some servers and build a data center. What you're going to do is you're going to go to Jeff Bezos and you're going to say, hey, Amazon, I'd like to have some web services. Would you please provide me a virtual server? And you'll lease that from him or you'll rent it at so many cents an hour. Much more cost effective than 5 or 10 or 15 years ago when we went out and said, the first thing is we've got to go to the Dell website and figure out How many servers do we need to buy to make this happen? Another major trend, social networking is going to be increasingly important. We've seen a ton of innovation in this space, a ton of evolution, some merging. Okay, what was the latest social merger that you saw? What did Facebook buy recently? Instagram. How well did that turn out? $1 billion. Okay, for the Instagram founders, that was pretty nice. $1 billion. What impact has that had on the Facebook community since then?
More photos of people's kids.
More photos of people's kids. Okay, so there's constant experimentation going on, and we're going to see that continue to evolve. I think it's important to be in social networking, and I think you guys are good at that. And so I hope you stay good at that. I believe mobile devices are a game changer, especially when the app can be context aware. I love the fact that my Google Nexus phone here, my Galaxy Nexus phone, when it's time to go home, there's a little pop-up when I open up my phone and it says, you know what, it's 18 minutes to home, traffic's light, or it's 23 minutes today, there are some trouble spots, and it just knows. It's watched what I've been doing, it knows where my home is, it knows where my work is. As I go to other new places, I search for locations, it asks me, do you want to remember this or not? And we have this symbiotic thing going on. I think she's in love with me. I'm not sure. No, that's not true. Anything you can do in the location awareness area is a big deal. So I had a student who wrote a mobile app that said, hey, you know what, I'm tired of the phone ringing during class. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a little electronic butler that when it sees that I'm at my location where I take classes, I'm going to turn off the ringer if my schedule says I'm in class right now. So it has access to all those resources, it can pull them together and behave in a really intelligent way. So throughout this semester, watch for these principles and trends. Think about how you can use technology to transform, innovate, and build. And most of all, I hope that you will somehow figure out a way to get involved and to network. And I'm talking about people networking, not computer networking, okay? Just for you geeks out there. Talk to people, network, share your ideas, get involved. Here's all of our contact information. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.